This is Coach Schuman here for the Success for Life podcast. I'm on with Coach Racioppi, one of the QB coach extraordinaires out there, especially on the East Coast. One guy who's really improved his brand from a coaching standpoint, and where kids are lining up, not just kids, but pro quarterbacks as well, are lining up to work with him. He's fastly becoming known as one of the QB whisperers out there around the country. Tony, welcome to being on the Success for Life podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave. I really appreciate this.
I got to watch you live work with one of my guys a little bit, at least, and I come very impressed away with your charisma and your enthusiasm and your excitement for the game, and obviously kids respond to that. Tell everybody a little bit about I know your background, but a little bit about your background, so they can understand a little bit more about you, where you come from, coaching wise, and all of that.
Well, I appreciate you having me, number one. Number two, from a background standpoint, so I grew up in Ocean Township, New Jersey, down the shore. I went to high school at Ocean Township High School, freshman, sophomore year. Started as a sophomore, was all state as a quarterback. Transferred to Red Bank Regional, played my junior, senior at Red Bank, as well as I was a basketball guy and a baseball guy too. So I was a three-sport guy. I had 11 varsity athletes in high school, or varsity letters. Went to Tennessee Tech. I actually committed to the University of Maryland as a junior to play quarterback, and their staff got fired like 10 days before the signing date. So I was kind of stuck, 8, 9, 10 days from signing day. So I ended up committing to Tennessee Tech as one of the coaches from the Maryland staff. Ended up going there. So, at that point, I went down there. I redshirted a year, played quarterback my redshirt freshman year, was ranked 20th in the country in passing, and I got moved to linebacker. So, things didn't really line up for me from the quarterback standpoint. At that time in my life, our athletic director's son was a true freshman at the time. So, I learned that, it doesn't matter sometimes how hard you work. It was a really good life lesson for me. So I came home and weighed a lot of options, whether it was going to a Division I school to transfer to, or at that time, Rowan University was they played in the NCAA finals a bunch of times. Turned out some really good players over the years. So I decided to go there, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And, I played as a sophomore. I started as a junior. I led all of college football in touchdown passes and yards, all levels as a junior. And senior year, I, again, finished, in the top 10 in that. So, when I graduated, I was the fourth-rated passer in NCAA history. It was just an awesome experience. Opened a lot of doors for me. So I played overseas for a year. I came back and played arena football for a year. Atlantic City Card Sharks had an indoor team for one season, which was awesome for me, being a Jersey kid and obviously going to do college in South Jersey. A lot of my friends came and family. And then I actually signed with the Jets in 2004 as a free agent. They were high on me in the draft. They actually called me in the 5th round, told me they were going to take me in the 6th round if things kind of lined up. I would have been the first Division III quarterback ever drafted. They ended up taking Brooks Bollinger in the 6th round, which, stunk for me. But it just kind of made me stay patient, work hard, and things still kind of lined up. So I was there in 2004 as a free agent, got cut. And then I went down to the Dolphins in 2005 as a free agent and got cut. So at that point in my life, I just, wanted to still play as long as I possibly could. Obviously, things didn't work out for me, so I jumped into coaching. So at that time, I was the office coordinator at Kane University for 1 year. I started teaching phys ed at Union High School. I did that for a year and a half. Got a job at Temple as a GA under Al Golden in 2006. I was the offensive GA. George DeLeon was the OC. Great learning experience for me, but I also learned that at that time in my life, college football was kind of not in the cards for me. Just from an hour standpoint, from a time standpoint, just Temple situation-wise, we were kind of like, I was the assistant quarterback coach. I was the GA. I was the secretary. I was, the jack of all trades. So, learned a ton, learned a lot of ball, which is great, but just decided that I wanted to be a phys ed teacher and a high school coach. So there's people in my family that do that, and I saw the impact they made on people's lives. One, two, I just saw their lifestyle. They always seemed happy and content, and made a difference. Like me and you both do. So I coached at Long Branch for 2 years down the shore. Danny George, the head coach there, who's one of the biggest mentors in my life. I consider him an uncle. He's been with me since I was a little kid. I've known him, family, friends. And then I came up to Franklin. So I taught phys ed at Franklin now for 11 years. I coached at Franklin for 9 years, and I've been at the Hun School now in Princeton for 2 years. So that's kind of my my background as far as playing and coaching, from the private world, it's kind of funny. I always tell people, like, I've been a head coach in basketball, I've been a head coach in baseball, I've been a head coach in football. I really never got into the private stuff just because I was always coaching. So, really, I interned with the Jacksonville Jaguars 2 summers in a row in the summer in training camp with the offensive staff, with quarterbacks, where I met Buddy Tevens at the time, who's Dartmouth's head coach and runs the Manning camp. So that's where we kind of connected. Saw me coach, saw me do my thing, and invited me to be a counselor at the camp. So worked the Manning camp now 6 years. I'm one of the top guys. All the top college quarterbacks that they invite in. I'm one of the 4 coaches they invite on the field with Eli and Peyton to actually train those guys for 4 days, either at lunchtime or later on in the day between sessions with the high school kids. So it's been a great experience for me, and obviously getting to work with the top end guys. And, from a confidence standpoint, you fix guys that are playing at Notre Dame, UCLA, and USC, and, top 5 picks. It gives you more confidence to work with anybody. So that's how I kind of got into the private stuff, was just I started training those guys, and then, college guys started wanting to get work in, and then pro guys started wanting to get work in. So that's where I started working at Test, just to do the combine stuff. And then, I remember starting, I had like 5 or 6 high school kids. That's the only time I had. I would do a group of 6 high school kids, and that was it. And I would lock it into 6, and I would kind of do those guys for 2-3 months at a time. And then it just got to the point where it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I'm at the point where I got, over 70 high school kids signed up for multiple sessions with me right now, on top of, 6 combine guys. And then now obviously the pro guys coming back off the NFL seasons.
That's really cool. That's an amazing practice you built up there. First of all, Atlantic City, I don't know if you know, Arena football's coming back.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's coming back. My roommate from college, Shane Stafford, is going to be the offensive coordinator there. Yep. So pretty cool. He actually just reached out to me a couple days ago to talk to me about everything down there, because he's not familiar.
Right.
Coming from,
Boardwalk Hall, obviously, right?
Yeah, Boardwalk Hall.
Yeah, it was great. It was an awesome home field. It was, we shared a locker room with the Boardwalk Bullies, the hockey team.
Yep.
And it was, again, you couldn't beat it. I mean, for me, being a Jersey high school kid, right, and a kid who played college in South Jersey, it was, like I tell people all the time, the toughest games I played were home, because all my idiot friends would come and, bust my chops, and, going on the road was like easier for me, so it was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's interesting. It's funny because I live now in Lincroft, which is right by near where you grew up.
Sure.
Amazing area. So, and football wise, it's a great. Even though I coach in up in North Jersey, this area is a great area for football.
Right.
For football, absolutely great area. Tell me a little bit about. So, you got into you're in multiple different levels. So you've been in the high school level, you've been in college level, work with guys at the pro level. What have you found is kind of the difference in coaching athletes at each of those different levels?
I think, the thing that's common on all 3 is that you're developing, right? You're making guys better. A lot of times high school kids, the fun thing for me is like, I'll do like 42 to 50 kids on a Sunday right now. So, I mean, Sunday is just insane for me, and I do groups of 6, no more than 6 kids, so everybody gets coached up. It doesn't matter how many more kids I add. I just got to add more sessions. I believe in small groups. But the fun thing for me is that, the same day I have a 7th grader and I'm teaching them literally how to get in a great balanced space. At the end of that day, I have a Davis Webb coming in, we're talking about, Greg Williams secondary coverage and, under fronts and, zone blitzes and all that kind of stuff. So in the same day, you're covering so many different things. The nice thing about the high school kids is sometimes they're so raw that you have this big ball of clay that you can kind of mold and help. The thing for me is, like, I coach high school, and I've coached high school, I've coached college, and obviously I've interned in the NFL 3 times, 2 times with the Jaguars, and 2 summers ago I was actually with the Cardinals, which was an awesome experience because I was on the offensive staff in the morning and throughout practices, and then after dinner I flipped over to the personnel side at night. So I learned the whole NFL business. I was there for 17 days, so that was awesome for me, even from a training standpoint. Obviously, as you know, as an agent, the stuff you go through, kind of both sides. It was just, again, it was eye opening. It was, my mind was blown in a lot of areas. The biggest thing I see, honestly, I feel bad for the college kids of all the levels, just because, and I don't blame the college coaches. It's just the way the time is set up. They really don't get a lot of time on the field in season, right, with Indy, so fundamental fundamentals are kind of lacking at that time. And I've been there, I've done it, so I know how they feel. Number one. Number two, in the offseason, they can't work with them, so like those guys, there's a dire need for the college kids, especially the Division I guys. They want to come home and obviously work on their game. And a lot of times, if your fundamentals are struggling, you're struggling as a player. And then obviously if you're struggling as a player, your confidence dips. So a lot of times when guys come home in the winter to work with me, most of the time it's fixing them fundamentally. And the second thing is fixing them mentally, like instilling the confidence back into them that they are really good players. And that, it just, hey, it might have been your front shoulder. It might have been, the way you were dropping. It might have been the way your front leg was closing you off, to the middle, to the left side of the field, which made you swing. That's why you're late. That's why you threw some interceptions. So it's interesting seeing the different levels. Obviously, NFL guys come in and they don't want to work on, A through Z a lot of times. A lot of times those guys will come in and be like, Tony, listen, my back foot, it really gets me in trouble. Like I want to focus on A, B, C. And that's what we'll do. The nice thing about those guys, is they have so much access to film. Right. A lot of those guys, like Davis will go watch Aaron Rodgers for a week. Come in with notes on him of the things he likes and maybe he wants to try and incorporate in his game. So that's what we'll do. And then at the end of the day, it's like, okay, do you like that? All right, let's keep it. Let's put it in your game. Or it's like, oh, you know what? I can't do that. He's just really good. So, that's kind of how we do things. So, to answer your question, the neat thing about the experience is there's so many different kind of kids and so many different levels, and everybody needs something different.
It keeps you engaged and challenged at all times. It was one of the interesting things I saw, just building off, what you teach. So obviously as a head coach, I actually coach quarterbacks for all the teams I've ever been a head coach for.
Awesome.
And I thought what's really interesting is where you talk about the jump stop at the top of their drop.
Right.
It's something different than I've seen other quarterback coaches teach. Well, and it's interesting. It's order, I guess, to form a quick gather so they can get rid of the ball quickly, right. Which is different than where a lot of people teach, like plant that third step, plant that fifth step.
Push you out of the pocket, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. What's the theory behind that, and what do you think is the impact that it has on the quarterback's delivery?
The one thing I've seen, and the nice thing about working with guys at all levels, you start seeing so many kids, and you see the common flaws no matter what level, right?
Right.
So the common flaws I see in people's games most of the time are throwing the ball to the left of the field if I'm a righty, right?
Right.
Also on the hitch. So on the hitch and the pocket, most of the time guys hit that back foot too far outside their back hip, right? They push off that back foot, either get too much weight on that front leg going forward. So A, I'm off balance, and B, I lose power, right? Number one. Number two, also guys that push off that back foot at the top of the drop, push up, and they get too wide of a base, right? And they're constantly sailing the ball, and it's kind of like almost into an overstride kind of thing, where again, I lose my hips a little bit, my elbow's going to drop, my front shoulder's going to pop up, and I sail those second level throws. So I realized I came up with that through Drew Brees and watching Tom Brady. Tom Brady jump stops almost every single time he throws the football. He's not much. Not a huge rhythm guy, never really hits something in the pocket unless he climbs the pocket. So I separate movements in three ways. I separate, obviously, jump stops, which are our resets, right, where I'm bounced and I'm throwing the ball, the 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever in your progression. As I have climbs where I'm moving up in the pocket because I have to, right? I'm getting edge pressure, and then obviously slides off the midline. So that's how I kind of teach all three things in different segments, and then I'll obviously marry it together like, in game-like drills. So I came up with the jump stop through watching Brady, really so great. Brady goes like crossover foot jump stop. So he doesn't really hit his back foot a lot of times because, again, like I said, most people make bad throws off their hitch game because their back foot screws them up.
That's so interesting. That's really, really interesting. And I'm definitely going to apply that now with my guys. It's really good. I thought it was interesting. And I was watching how good the ball was coming out from these guys when they were doing it, and they were having much power and still maintaining the base they need to have and everything. So I thought that was really interesting. So NFL wise, you said your mind was blown a little bit. I want to build on that before I go into the next thing. So what was it about the NFL experience that you found that was so interesting in turning with them?
I obviously knew the playing side, did it for 2 years, right? I mean, obviously wanted to do it more than I did, right? But so I interned with the Jaguars, right? So I was just football when I was down there 2 summers in a row. So that was an eye-opening for me. I was impressed with a lot of the coaches, learned some new things, learned some new some schemes, some X's and O's that I've really incorporated in my NFL draft prep stuff with my guys in the classroom. But the Cardinals was great because I got to literally obviously see the coaching side, right? But I also got to see the personnel side and kind of how ownership kind of mended in. So, as a player, sometimes you're so naive to things and what goes on behind the scenes, where I was able to see kind of all three facets of an NFL team. So I saw the ownership side, saw how they, their relationship was kind of with personnel, and then personnel side with the coaching staff, and kind of how all three kind of groups kind of have to mend together and make a decision on a backup quarterback or a fourth receiver or a tight end or those kind of things. So it was neat seeing all those things because at the end of the day, it's something maybe I wanted to get into. I've had some opportunities in the NFL to be kind of a quality control guy or kind of get in as an entry level guy over the last 2 or 3 years, just because I've met so many people doing this. And people see you coach, and obviously you go through it. When people see you do your thing live, they're impressed with you. So it's the ultimate compliment, and the fun thing for me being a quarterback the last couple of years is a lot of times I'll have receivers and tight ends come in as well to test, and I'll end up throwing in pro days. So I've thrown at Rutgers, I've thrown at Monmouth, I've thrown, kind of all over the place. So, people see you interacting with kids and motivating, and you're in your element. It's the best way to describe it.
Absolutely. What have you found quarterbacks between, like, you work with a lot all the time, ongoing. What have you found is the difference between quarterbacks that get to, towards those elite levels from a mindset standpoint, and this is really, to help high school kids that really want to know, because you see it all the times. But this could go for anybody, but high school kids that want to become college players that want to become NFL players. Like what's the mindset things that can really get them to a different level? And this is taking talent aside, because obviously they're physical tools that are needed. But from a mindset standpoint, what are the things that you think are required for a quarterback?
The ultimate competitor, right? So at the end of the day, quarterbacks are the most competitive guy in the room, whatever room they walk in. There's a certain look to a quarterback when he walks in the room. There's an attention on him. I think there's, between that, I think, the second thing is the attention to detail, especially in the classroom, through film study, knowing themselves as they get older. A lot of times guys that, when they get to their 23, 24, 25 years old, they kind of know themselves, right? They know,
right.
I knew I was a baseball guy, right? So I knew when I made bad throws, I was pitching the football. I was pushing off the rubber, I was pushing too much, and I was an overstrider when I made a bad throw. So you kind of know yourself as you go through this, number one. Number two, I think as they get older, honestly, the less coaching you get from an individual standpoint. So, a lot of times in college, they're going to coach you. They're going to coach the starter. So when you're the third string guy, or you're the red shirt guy, a lot of times you have to kind of coach yourself from a fundamental standpoint, And obviously in the NFL, a lot of those guys, you're on your own, So you're watching your film. Why am I throwing the ball low? Why am I throwing the ball low and behind? Why am I late? All those things. That's on you to break down that film and study that film and know yourself and know what drills really to fix those things. So a lot of times when those guys come in, the juniors, the seniors in college, obviously the NFL guys, they know themselves pretty well. It's okay. How do I fix this issue that I have, right? And then when I'm at practice or I'm it's game 5 and it's that week and I'm kind of struggling right now throwing the ball, what can I do to fix those things? So that's the biggest thing I see is they're the ultimate competitors, and B, they know how to fix themselves as they get older.
The self-assessment, which obviously is a difficult thing, because you got to be able to look at yourself and be critical of yourself and not just pat yourself on the back,
right?
And not blame what other people see as a flaw on somebody else. I think that's a really interesting thing, that self-assessment. I think what's really interesting is the competitiveness, because I guess if you ask 9 out of 10 guys, they would say, their leadership ability. But when you watch Tom Brady, obviously leadership is really wrapped into competitiveness. Am I right to assume?
I think it's a combination of competitiveness and work ethic, right? So if you're one of the hardest working guys there and you're most competitive guy there, people are going to follow you.
That's really cool. That's really, really exciting. I actually wrote that down, because it's something that I think a lot of people can learn from, that ability to be competitive. And then that self-assessment ability, that key, those are two things that may not always go hand in hand. I would say in 99% of individuals in the world, the ability to be ultra competitive and then be a self-assessor is a difficult thing. So that's really what can make a guy like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers or even an all-state quarterback versus a guy who's a good quarterback.
Well, I think you're seeing too. I think you're seeing at the pro game. I mean, there's a reason why those guys are playing now to their late 30s and early 40s is because they're honest with themselves. They reassess themselves every summer. And I think that if you watch Drew Brees, season 2 compared to this year, if you watch Tom Brady in his 3rd season compared to this year, they've changed fundamentally for the better. They've constantly reassessed their fundamentals. They constantly reassess their diet, their nutrition, and their off-season programs for the better. And I saw it even with I'm obviously very close with Eli and Peyton, over the last couple summers. I mean, this is the best Eli Manning's ever looked last summer, because he changed what he did. He changed his diet. He changed his work. More pliability stuff that Tom does, more flexibility stuff in his training. Fundamentally, he's changed some things that he's done in the past, say. A lot of times, those, in the 90s, you were kind of taught to load on your back leg, right? You rip your front shoulder when you step and you transfer your weight, and those guys aren't doing that anymore. And stuff, obviously, that I teach because I've gotten that stuff from some of the best guys that have ever done it. So I teach certain things, and all the things I got from really those guys and being around those guys and talking fundamentals. And it's funny. I met Kurt Warner a couple years ago, and we were talking fundamentals. We're talking footwork, and he's like, "Well, what do you teach with this? What do you teach with that?" And he's kind of picking my brain a little bit. So he goes, "What do you teach to the left?" And I was like, well, "I teach, bucket step, right? Like we all." It's the way I was taught, right? Usually you teach what you were taught because it's what you know best. And he goes, well, what's your philosophy of quarterback training? What's your philosophy of playing quarterback? And I was like, well, I want balanced rotational throwers. That's my philosophy. He goes, well, Tony, what's balanced and rotational about bucket steps to the left? And he shows me what I was teaching. I was like, you know what? You are 100% right. Like, I feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world. So he goes, why don't you have them dovetail? Why don't you have them turn? It goes in your philosophy. It's about being balanced and straight to every throw, right? So you want to take the middle of the field and you want to turn it with your crossover foot. So that last crossover sets every angle you have and sets your balance to every single throw. And if you do that when your back foot hits, it's a straight throw to every guy from sideline to sideline. And I did it 3 or 4 times, and I was like, you know what? It's one of those like duh moments, right? Like, why didn't I think of that earlier? Why didn't I think of that idea? And for him, he goes, it changed my game. I was a Hall of Fame quarterback because I started doing this in my game with the Rams, and I didn't miss throws anymore, especially to the left.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. What do you think also on, I guess maybe like the 90s, there were quite a few lefty quarterbacks, but basically, like as an agent, when a guy comes to me and he's a lefty quarterback, it's basically like, no,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So what do you think it changes? The fact that people don't want to adjust their playbook, go into the left, or
I think that's 100% right. I think they a lot of times they're doing, as they're doing a lot of the mental tests now with guys. I know the Rams, or not the Rams, the Saints do one where it's kind of like how you learn. So it's like that 6 personality trait test, right? And a lot of times they have Drew Brees scores in those categories. So they wanted a guy to kind of, if everybody's equal, right, from a skill standpoint and trait standpoint, they wanted a guy that most learned like Drew, so they didn't have to reteach things, which I thought was interesting. I learned that one the other night. So, stuff like that, again, I think as much as they can keep common, and again, it's all about what? It's all about the starter, right? So if you're the 2, 3, or a practice squad guy, they want you as close to the starter as possible so they can kind of marry all those things together.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. That more of the starters are righties, and then it's just trickling down all the way. Sure. Obviously college and not high school, but college.
Right.
You have less lefties at that level. It's really interesting. I was reading a whole article about it and how, like, at one point there were quite a few, but now they're just basically
right.
They're basically.
Well, I mean, it probably makes more sense in college, right? Because the hash marks, so
right.
A lot of times now with the college game, a lot of times their concepts are more field boundary as opposed to like strong, weak, or right, left. So it's more boundary safety reads. That's the key for where you're going with the football. So a lot of things, a lot of fun for me right now is the fact that, like when you have these guys come in for the draft, I'm also learning 5, 6, 7 college offenses every year that they've run, so I'm kind of, again, adding that into my repertoire. And from an X&O standpoint, it's interesting hearing the different ways guys were taught to read coverages or taught to read concepts. And a lot of the spread guys, that's mostly what I'm hearing now, to tell you the truth, is coach, this is our field, concept. We're working here. If the boundary safety, stays on the boundary, stays on the hash or works over top of the X to the boundary. If the safety rotates to the field, or drops down, like a buzz look, then I'm going to go to the boundary, so it's, I'm starting to hear that more and more, with the same stuff.
What do you think about, and this, I'm digressing a little bit, but obviously it's there's nothing like talking to somebody that knows the game intensely. And what do you think about the fact I watching the NFL, at least, and when you see the playoffs, two different worlds, the NFL regular season, what wins games, at least just my observation, passing and scoring points wins a lot of games in a regular season. And then you just get to the postseason. Obviously the championship game, the Super Bowl showed that the most, but running the ball and power game and being able to play defense was a very big part of, and the passing attack was neutralized in some instances, not all, but in some instances, by guys playing multiple coverages and sticking their best guy over their best guy and playing a lot of man-to-man and getting after people.
Sure.
How does the NFL, because they got to figure this out, and Bill Belichick hasn't figured it out because he's got a hybrid going on, right?
Yes, yes.
You have the running attack, you have the fullback, you have their fullback's a high-paid fullback. They have the good running back, and then you have in regular season your high-powered spread game with a real good defense. How does an NFL team start to put together personnel? Because everyone thought coming into that Super Bowl game that Coach McVay was going to be completely that was going to be the future.
Sure.
And they ran the ball against Dallas. That's how they won the game against Dallas. But and played great defense. But now it's really like, okay, yes, you've got to have the spread passing game, which is a big part of college and high school, but now is working its way to the NFL. But you also have to be able to line up 23 personnel, 20 personnel and motion guys and do different kind of things and run a power attack. What is the solution to that at the NFL level?
I think the NFL game has kind of turned into an 11 personnel league, for the most part, right? So 3 receivers,
right.
1 tight end, 1 back. And then base defense wise, right? So base nowadays really isn't base anymore. It's not, it's not a 4-3 look or a 3-4 base look anymore. Now it's more of a 4-2 with a nickel,
right?
Or a 3-3 with a nickel, So the interesting thing with that is now teams that play nickel defense all the time. Now you stick fullback in the game, you kind of screw them up a little bit,
right?
So I thought the genius thing that Belichick did was one, attack their protections beautifully in 3rd and long. A lot of times out of an odd front, right? So the Rams were 4-man sliding a lot of times, which most teams do against an odd front. And he did a great job kind of keeping like a nickel, smaller linebacker safety kind of guy, to the strong side and then looping him around to the weak side. So they were getting 3-on-2 to the weak side a lot of times and pressuring Jared Goff. Belichick forever usually will put his second best corner on your best player, receiver-wise, and double him with a safety, knowing that you're going to go to 2 now, right? So he's going to put his best corner on 2. So now he's going to lock down your best guy with 2 guys, put his best player on your second guy. So now you're going to live in the world of throwing the ball to number 3 and number 4 all time. The nice thing about having 2 weeks for the Super Bowl for those guys is there's so many tendencies, So, they were such a man-to-man team, and especially this year, they played a lot of cover 2 on early downs, and there was no big plays in the play action game, right? Maybe once, twice, right? They hit something like a deep over, or
right,
something like that. But that's where they made their living, was running the ball, like you said, and then play action off that. And they did a great job in the box, stuffing the runs, especially the stretch play they love so much. Squashing gaps and make sure everybody that were gap sound. They had 70 guys in their gaps, but at the same time, not falling asleep, on that back half of the flashing game. They really didn't give up anything, any chunk plays, So, it's going to be interesting as the NFL moves forward, like you said, the next couple of years, right? So everybody's falling in love with the air raid stuff and the RPO stuff that's gotten so big in college football. And actually, I talked to Mark Schofield the other day about this. We did a nice little thing that's going to come out soon, and we talked about how kind of the air raid and the RPO game has kind of worked its way into the NFL and kind of why. And then obviously from a draft standpoint, and you go through it, 10 years ago, if you heard an air raid guy, it was kind of like, oh, no, we're not going to touch that guy. Right? He threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns just because of the system. That's it. And I think you're starting to see better quarterbacks at those programs, So, I talk to Davis about this all the time. Like, look at that room he was in. It was him. It was Pat Mahomes. It was Baker Mayfield. It was Michael Brewer who left, went to Virginia Tech and started. That was one quarterback room.
Right.
That's the first pick in the draft. That's the 10th pick in the draft. And that's the third-round pick in one room, So you're seeing better players go to those schools as well.
Yeah, because they want to throw. That's the bottom line. The quarterbacks want to throw. And I think what's interesting is, like, I look at it like basically Bill Belichick was looking at that game. You leave your skinny guys on the field. We'll bring our big guys in. And, you leave your big guys on the field and we'll put our skinny guys in. And they have a unique set of skinny guys, meaning their skinny guys are short, quick guys that are you can't have a 6'1", 200-pound corner on those guys and cover them as nickel. Right. And that's what I think is so unique, how they develop their personnel, is that you have you'll have your traditional quote unquote tall receiver. Then you have such skinny, quick guys like James White, who's like a running back and a receiver, Burkhead, who's a tailback and a receiver, and then obviously Edelman. And then so they're waiting to see who you think that they have on the field, and then they just kind of go against the grain on that. It's everything's I bet you if you talked to Belichick and you actually cornered him and you're actually able to get him in an actual real conversation, it would be. I'm just looking at it logically, like you got their heavy guys out there. I'm going to put my skinny guys out there.
It's not that hard, right? Like,
right. Exactly.
It's it's interesting. Like, I've also heard through people that, if you look at their offensive line, they have the highest Wonderlic scores of any offensive line in the NFL. So he'll take a lower rated guy that has a higher Wonderlic score over, say, a higher rated guy who scored kind of low on it. So, obviously with the Wonderlic on offense, it's offensive line, your quarterback, and your tight end. Those three guys, they want the highest Wonderlic scores. Like, let's see how they think and they process information. So I always thought that was interesting, and it makes sense. You want smart, tough guys that are going to do their job.
Yeah, their center, Dave Andrews, is a good example of that. Dave Andrews, he was great center in college, but doesn't have any of the measurables that normally we look at. We'd actually talked to him. I knew him from our events for many years. Okay. And what I knew about him was he was brilliant, literally brilliant intellectually. And obviously,
the center is the smartest guy, right? Coach, right? Your smartest guy is usually your center because he's making all the calls, odds and evens, right? So, yeah, I agree 100% with you.
And as soon as he got picked up by the Patriots, me and my partner at the time were like, oh, he's definitely making it. Like, they will truly appreciate what David Andrews. And next thing you know, he was starting right away, and the rest is history. But that's so interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit on the business side. So we talked a lot of football, but what do you think separates yourself from other quarterback coaches that might be out there, or people that run businesses like that has developed the following that you have? And you don't have to give away any secrets, but I could tell a lot from your personality. Obviously, I think you got a fantastic personality and gravitate towards that. Sure. Obviously, you're knowledgeable. What do you think are some of the things that separate you?
I think the biggest thing for me that's helped me the most is, like I said, I've coached for a long time, and I've coached 43 high school seasons between football, basketball, baseball, and track. So I know how to coach and teach. So I think that helps tremendously. I've been a teacher for 15 years, so I know how to kind of teach it to every kind of learner and every kind of age for the most part. So, I think for me, from a training standpoint, like I said, I coached first. So, like, when I do a lesson, I treat you like you're my quarterback. Like I'm at practice right now. It's not so much a, like you see like in the lab or like, all that stuff you read people write about. So to me, it's not a lab. I'm on the field.
Right.
You're my quarter. If I'm training you, you're my quarterback for that session. So, I think I work that way. I'm not, a lot, obviously the college coaches love the stuff that I'm doing with their guys, and I'm getting great feedback from them. And the biggest thing they tell me is like, I don't see any bags. I don't see any cones. I don't see, any bands in your stuff. And I'm like, well, no, I wouldn't do that at practice, So, everything I believe in doing is about being game relevant, making somebody more fundamentally sound, cleaning up their footwork, being able to move in the pocket, understand the game, understand how footwork is tied into every single route we're going to throw and why, on, different drops and those kind of things, So I think what's kind of separated me is that, I'm a coach first. I'm not one of those, I got into this later, which kind of helped me. I think just because, again, it's a combination of being a teacher, of being a coach for so long, one, and two. And then the last thing is, obviously, I'm lucky that I have access to the Peyton Mannings and Eli Mannings and the, those guys in the world where you're constantly reflecting on what you're teaching. Like, is this right? Is there a better way of doing this? Because again, it's, if Eli's doing it, that means Tom Brady was doing it because they all steal from each other. So every time I get down there in summer in Thibodaux, Louisiana for camp, a lot of times I'm teaching this. What do you like about this? I love it. It's part of the deal right there. It looks like a linebacker to me.
Oh, he's way too slow. He's made a guest appearance on almost every single one as soon as he's got a half hour in.
I love it.
Well, I want to – Troy, give me 2 seconds. You want to give me a couple minutes? You want to say hi to Coach? No?
No, what's up, my man? How you doing?
Say hi. This only makes it. This is like appearance number 4 this year. Troy, give me 1 minute, and then we'll get right back to it. Okay. So there's one other thing I wanted to know that's really, really interesting about of the way that you do things. So, when I coach track for a long time myself,
Sure.
and I coach in football. In football, a lot of times, you get into strategy and everything like that. What I loved about track was the technical things about it. And when I started coaching football, and specifically position-wise, because I coached track first before I coached football, I realized that technical aspect I learned in track really could apply to football in a unique way, because a lot of coaches don't go that deep into the technical aspect, and teaching that and combining that with strategy. What is your kind of thought on that from that standpoint?
No, I agree with you 100%. Like, the biggest thing for me is even when I train, quarterbacks, obviously we start with all those little details, right? And we break every single thing down. And again, a lot of times I kind of worked backwards, right? So like you asked about the jump stop before, a lot of things I've done with stuff I teach is because I see the mistakes people make. And it kind of built me into a philosophy of what I teach with certain things. Like, so for instance, I don't teach shoulders as a power source, right? So a lot of people teach, rotate your hips and shoulders through the throw, and a lot of times I've seen guys that try to use their shoulders so much as a power source, right? So the front shoulder is usually tied to my throwing elbow, right? So my front shoulder opens too soon, my throwing elbow drops, and I come across my body, right? So a lot of times the stuff I teach is based off the issues that I see with guys, again, at all levels. That's the nice thing about the way I do things is that, at the end of the day, I'm always going to do fundamental stuff first, right? But at the end of the day, we're always going to kind of tie that into real football, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about playing real football better, right? So, it's understanding how to throw a curl. It's understanding how to drop it, maybe slide and have to throw the same curl. It's cover 3, the ball's thrown usually in this window. If it's cover 2, it might be the next window. If it's man free, inside leverage, I might have to put the ball on his back shoulder, bring him down the stem a little bit. So it's, just throwing a curl, there's 4 or 5 different ways of throwing it, right? So, so that's kind of, I try to teach all things through that session, So I agree with you. A lot of the med ball stuff that I do is again, breaking those fundamental things down, like you said, to the smallest details. But at the end of the day, at the end of the session, they need to be able to play football as well.
What do you think about, from a business standpoint, where does it go from here for you within what you're doing? So do you think that the current state of what you're doing can continue to expand? Is it something that you want to continue to expand, or is it something that you're going to continue to focus more on elite guy. Like it's a really interesting, business model, because I always found training to be something that, once you get your expertise, and do you continue to develop people underneath you, or do you have to, in order to expand, or do you keep it like where it is, and then does that begin to strap your time, and do you get at some point say to yourself, how do I expand from it? Where do you see it going for you?
That's a great question, and one honestly I struggle with at times, just because I've never had this goal of being like, I want to be the best trainer in New Jersey, or I want to be the best trainer in the country. That's never crossed my mind. Like, how do you even justify that? Like, how do you compare that? So I think that I think I put out a great product, right? I think that kids know they get better every single minute they spend with me. I think there's an evolution over time, from junior year, senior year, or freshman year in college to sophomore year in college. I think the beauty of the quarterback position is, and I went through this a lot with a lot of the college guys that I train, because they're young, right? So, a lot of times, like Kenny Pickett, per se, from Pitt, right, who I've had for a while, had some glimpses as a true freshman, right, where he did a great job. Sophomore year, had some great moments and obviously struggled at times, So, I think for him, I think it's like, as a quarterback, sometimes you go, okay, I threw for 15 touchdowns as a sophomore. Well, that means I got to throw for 20 as a junior. It's not a better year. Or you might be a 5 times better player, right? But you might have lost some players on the outside. Your OC might have changed. It's a different scheme. So I think for me, to answer your question without getting long-winded is, I don't really have goals in what I'm doing. It's kind of, I take it day by day. I take it week by week. And it's kind of worked out for me. So I know. But by times of year, I know when I'm busy. I know when I'm not busy. Like, right now, obviously with the high school kids rocking and rolling, I got, 5 NFL draft guys with me right now that are here full time. And obviously, David, I still talk to and kind of train, through cell phones and those kind of things up at UConn, So, like those guys are taking my attention obviously during the week, and I'm spending a lot of time with them obviously because I want to put a great product out there, because I know they're going to for me. And obviously as we get through this thing and those guys get into, mini camps and those kind of things, and I really start diving in more and more to the high school kids, kind of getting them ready for, their seasons or camps or whatever their goal is, So, really from a time standpoint, I don't know if I have more time, So, I don't think if there's a niche. I don't know. I enjoy kind of – to answer your question, I enjoy high school kids. I enjoy college kids. I enjoy pro guys. Do I see myself working with them, next year, 5 years from now? Absolutely. I think all 3 groups make me a better coach with the other 2, if that makes sense. Teaching a freshman kid the same day I'm teaching a 4-year vet in the NFL. So the Cowboys have reached out to me. They want me to train Dak Prescott, over the next couple months up here, either in Jersey or you're going to fly me down to Dallas, obviously, when I'm done with the combine stuff. So, you get a guy like Dak and it could be 2 things on Dak Prescott that's holding him back fundamentally. Hopefully I'll find out in the next, 5 to 10 minutes of a throwing session, So, stuff like that comes on your plate, and it's awesome. It's exciting, but it's the crazy thing again about the quarterback position is you're so tied into the team you play on and your system, So there's some great players out there that play on some really great teams, right? With some unimaginative offenses that don't look like really good players. And there's some okay guys out there that play on some freaking awesome teams with some great coaches that can scheme guys up, So that's kind of the stressful things about me in the fall is seeing those college guys go play, and you can't help them, Like you did all you could from a fundamental standpoint and all the stuff in the classroom that you spend, but at the end of the day, it's about, they got to do their job on their teams.
Absolutely. What is it that quarterbacks in college can do? I mean, maybe part of it's what you said earlier is that self-assessment, that they can really help themselves in season when they're not able to get that level of coaching that they might have been able to get when they're out of season, that individual attention, I should say. Sure. I mean, obviously they have their position periods, but, that's not ample, 15 minutes each day or 20,
if that, yeah.
Yeah, if that, right, yeah. to be able to get things done. What would you recommend they start to do to be able to help themselves in season?
Well, like it's funny you say that. Like usually most training camps are about a 12-minute indie period, And usually by game 3 or 4, it gets cut down to about 7 minutes. That's usually what most college Division I staffs will do. So in 7 minutes, how much fundamental stuff you get? And you're lucky to get, a couple throws in. So the biggest thing I tell those guys is you need to pick 3 or 4 drills that you want to do in Indy no matter what. So like, for instance, at Rutgers, I tell – I've trained all the Rutgers guys at some point between Art and Jonathan Lewis and Jalen Chapman who transferred. But, what I'll tell those guys is, listen, Nick, you need to do these 4 drills no matter what. Whether it's before practice, whether it's in Indy, if Coach McNulty gives you time to do it, which he does. You need to do these 4 things, which will keep you sharp fundamentally. And then you need to find a down period at some point in practice, whether it's a water break, right, or a special teams kind of thing where you're not doing much on the side. And then you need to do these 2 or 3 drills that, because you open your front shoulder, this is your drill, right? Because you're an overstrider, this is your drill, right? If you're a hip slide guy, right? So when you step, you transfer all your weight to your front leg. All right, this is the drill you need to do. So, so what I'll do with those guys is A, these are drills you need to do because, they're the right drills to do from a fundamental standpoint. And B, these are drills you need to do because this is what you do wrong when you're wrong. And then, this is how you can fix it. So that way it's kind of like if you threw 3 or 4 bad balls in that period, that's it, right? It's not a bad practice or
right.
a bad week for you, which happens with guys because, and we've all been there. I've been there, it's where like that week you just don't have it. You don't feel right. You feel off. You're not throwing a tight ball. You're a little behind. You're a little bit low. You're just, your deep ball's lacking a little bit. It could be just one little thing, one little tweak in your back.
Yeah, it's stealing time. I mean, that's the cute thing is how well can you steal time? It's one of the things I always tell my players, like when you got these little 2-minute breaks in between. What are you doing in between? Are you gonna sit down? You gotta get water. I get it. You gotta get kids.
Right.
But as soon as you get all that stuff done, you need to be figuring out ways to steal time because there's only so much time in the day in practice, and that's how you get better. I mean, that's how we always found long snappers and
Sure.
it always found kickers. Like we always get guys stealing time, and that's one of the ways to do it.
All right. That's a great coaching point. I agree with you 100%. Like, so a lot of times, a lot of the college guys, they'll come home with me, right? Like I said, I kind of, you have to clean them up fundamentally from what they did at the end of the year, or they didn't feel right, and they kind of, got lazy with some things maybe, or things weren't coached because again, you're putting in plays,
right?
But a lot of times they'll come home and we'll fix some things and focus on some things, and then when they go back to school, I'll give them 4, 5, 6, 7 things. I'll write it down for them that they need to focus on when they throw with their guys when they get back to campus. That way when they go into spring ball, they're good to go. And then when they come out of spring ball at the end of the year, I tell them to write down and take notes on stuff they struggle with, where it could be second level throws to the left. It could be deep throws to the right. It could be seam throws, right, where sometimes they're too flat with the football. Could be off balance on hitches. Like my hitch game coach, I just don't feel right. I'm getting too forward. And then when they come home, at the end of the semester, like after spring practice is over, going into the summer, that's what we focus on. And again, you kind of empower them by doing that stuff because again, like I said, my biggest thing is you need to know yourself and you need to know how to fix yourself, right? So if I'm always just telling you what to do, the nice thing is when they do come home, they know what they're doing because they either they assess themselves or they got it from their quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, which again, you're helping that guy out. So, sometimes you get a guy that doesn't like the fact that you work with their guys or, you fight that sometimes.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you're helping them get their guy better, and the good ones out there know that they don't have time. They don't have time to fix those guys because they can't. They can't coach them in the offseason. So.
You can't coach them. Well, that's the big thing. Is I told my kids, you got to go to somebody in the offseason if you're a quarterback. I mean, if you're not going to somebody that's good, you're not getting better. And then next thing you know, like if you're just waiting until when we come around in June,
too late.
It's too late. And you're right. We can't work with them like you could stand back and you could hand them a drill sheet, but you can't get on the field with them and coach them up to 500 points. Right. So there's only so much you can really do with them. And that's problemsome. And if they don't get with somebody and fine and tune those things, it is way too late. It's an exploding world. It's funny because when I started running my camps back in 2005, I mean, there was a couple people maybe, and now any guy that's picked up a football and thrown it a few yards.
Listen, it's funny because I have Steve Calhoun who runs Armed and Dangerous.
Yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Steve's one of my best friends, right?
Yep.
So he's my roommate at the Manning camp with Rich Bartell. You know, the three of us are always together, and along with David Morris, right from QB Country. So the four of us are kind of like, that's our pack, you know. So it's funny because he always says, like, you think it's bad in Jersey? Come to Cali, bro. So he was like, come to Cali, bro. Every 5 yards, there's somebody, you know, it might have been a freshman quarterback in high school that's doing lessons, you know. So, and they're getting clients. You know, like you're seeing 6, 8, 10, 15. You know,
they're all getting they're getting some clients. It's funny because I know Steve Calhoun, because Steve Calhoun did my very first camps in California back in like 2007, 2008. Like Steve was just beginning. I mean, he was doing QBs already, but like was just beginning to build it. I don't think it might not have been called Armed and Dangerous back then. It might have just been like Steve Calhoun training at that time.
Right.
But now, you know, it evolved into that. But yeah, it's funny because I've worked with many. I don't know if you heard of Jeff Christensen. I work with Jeff.
Yeah, sure. I've talked to him a bunch.
Yeah. So Jeff was Jeff is a good friend. I've known him for many years. He started. I met him back in my camps back in like 2007, 2008. Because
Chicago, right? Out in Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago. Yeah. He would come work my camps, and he's a unique guy, and he's the right fit for certain people, not the right fit for other people.
I agree.
Yeah. I know, you know, he'll tell you that too. So
absolutely.
And I think that's I think it's an interesting thing because it has exploded everywhere, and but there are people that do things much better than others, and I think besides the technique. By the way, I learned a lot from a technique standpoint just listening to you. But besides that part, the mindset of helping guys understand the ability to teach kids and to help them grow and be able to do it the right way, not just throwing out, you know, like a lot of what you mentioned, like, you know, guys pulling out contraptions. You know, it takes more time for some of these guys to pull out their contraptions than the coach.
It's funny, like, you know, I always felt like, and I tell my quarterbacks this all the time, like if I go watch a practice, right, and I see a guy like hopping over bags and shuffling through bags and sliding around cones, and that guy's just wasting time. Like that's a indie period time killer where that guy just doesn't feel like, right? There's so many more things to the position.
Right.
You know, I could take 4 drills and do those 4 drills in 45 minutes. Like that's how in-depth those drills are. That, and again, like, you know, a first level throw, a second level throw, and a third level throw all change within those 4 little drills, you know? So I think, you know, from the quarterback role standpoint, I think, you know, like you said, there was just a couple guys kind of doing it in the beginning. And I don't know if they were very good at it. They just kind of had everybody because no one else was doing it, you know. And I think better people kind of come along, and I think there's kind of a bitterness because of that.
Right.
But they're not as good as other people out there, but you know, so they're losing clients and they get mad at you. And you know, my whole thing has always been, if I worked really hard, I teach them all the right stuff, which I know I do, and I treat people right, I'm good. I care less what people say. And you know, a lot of times you even see stuff in the social media world, right, where somebody, you post like a 8-second video and then everybody's got a critique on it. Meanwhile, you know, that's 8 seconds out of an hour and 20-minute workout. You know? So how do you even know what that guy's, you know, and again, like, and I do it sometimes, like you see somebody post something, you're like, that kid goes to that guy for that. But again, I don't know what he's being taught for the other hour and a half that he's there. He might do a great job, you know, so who am I to comment on anybody, you know? So, that's the biggest thing I see is everybody kind of – it's funny. It's an ego-driven world. Obviously, you have quarterbacks training quarterbacks, so you got some alpha males mixed in there. So I keep my opinions myself. I just work hard and I stay in my own lane. And it's kind of worked out for me, and everybody else kind of beats each other up, and I just kind of sit back and do my thing. So I don't get caught up with it, and that's it.
You've done a great job. I mean, the client base you have. I mean, and more your name comes up. So like because I always go to as like there are people that I know, right? And then I always go to basically like what kids start to say to me, right? And then obviously I like to see it too. And that obviously helps because I think I'm a pretty smart guy and I can recognize when someone knows how to coach. Because really that's what it comes down to is like, you know, when people talk about being a QB trainer or any kind of trainer they are, like, you know, when I think of trainer, I think of like the personal trainer that's, you know, teaching someone how to do walking lunges.
Right, exactly.
And giving them the water bottle. That's
what I think. You're a coach.
Right, you're a coach. You know, a coach comes in there and not just teaches you drills, but helps you understand the important parts of the game and and all those kind of things. That's what I love about what you're doing. Like you're a coach first, you're a teacher first.
Appreciate it.
And those two things are the key, I think, to really being successful in this in the long run, because a coach and a teacher and like I would say what you said is so true. The drills, things like, it's like, okay, you want to see me? I can make up magic drills. I can make them up as good as anyone.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, I think that, I think guys, they copy the Elite 11 model, right, at times, or they, again, they see stuff on YouTube that kind of looks good. And why are you teaching it? At the end of the day, I can tell you every single thing that I teach you and why, and the purpose of that to help you be a better quarterback playing the game of football. If it doesn't fit into that, I don't do it. So there's so many more details to every single thing. A first window throw, it could be a second window throw, it could be over top of somebody, layer in the football. There's so many little things to go over. Like I could be there for 3 hours if I wanted to. So, I think the biggest thing, for me is that, the ultimate compliment is guys like you telling me that, and obviously high school coaches, and that's kind of, I've had so many high school coaches reach out to me like, will you please train my quarterback? He's been going to, whatever, whoever, and it's only gotten worse.
Right.
Like, they're getting better, but they're getting worse. And could you please almost, fix them in a way? So, to me, that's the ultimate compliment that your peers are sending you kids.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Well, on that note, let's tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you, all the different social media, right? Well, whatever you want to give them information.
It's really easy, at TonyRaz03. So that's my Twitter page as well as my Instagram page. I'm at Test Football Academy, which is in Martinsville, New Jersey. We're about 15 minutes north of Rutgers, right up Martinsville, which is up the hill there. So most of the time I'm based out of Test. Well, obviously the weather's cold here in Jersey, but once it gets nice out, obviously I expand out to different fields in different parts of New Jersey.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks so much for being on.
I appreciate you.
Absolute pleasure. I probably talked to you for 5 hours.
No doubt about it. Well, thanks for having me, Dad. I appreciate everything you do. And again, I've followed your camps for forever, and obviously know you as a tremendous coach and the business you've built, from an agent standpoint. And again, you have a tremendous eye for talent, and the guys you represent are high character guys who can play the game.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I love the game. My life's been about it. So as is yours. And, best of luck continuing in the future.